the question looks good. Calling up.
Water towers, fly! Yeah!
Ego down to nominal.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
All right, folks. You know the drill. Let us know if you can hear us now. You know the drill, folks. Here we go. I had to bring some audio up there. Let me know that everything is good. Let's see what we got. Yikes. Hello. Yo-ho. 5x5. Everything looks good. Oh, you heard me. Wait, you heard me whistling that? You heard me whistling that, apparently. I was whistling that for a little bit. I didn't think my mic was going to pick it up. Anyways, we are back with another exciting episode of NASA Spaceflight Live, NSF Live, our weekly show we do on Saturdays at roughly 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Have a very special guest and a lot to talk about today, so I'm going to hop right into it here. My name's John Galloway. You've seen me on occasion on the streams, not so much NSF Live recently, but we've also got with us today the guy who's forgot more about Kerbal Space Program than most of us will ever know, and a bunch of other actual astronomy stuff, Mr. Scott Manley. Give a big warm hello to Scott here, folks. Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Hello!
Can you all hear Scott there okay? Let us know in chat. How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing fantastic. It's been a very busy week.
You ready to talk about a lot of space stuff?
Oh, one of the most interesting bits of space stuff in a long time happened yesterday. Well, today, yeah.
Excellent. And then also, of course, we've got Chris Gebhardt with us as well. Chris Gebhardt, Assistant Managing Editor of NASASpaceflight. Chris, how you doing today?
I am doing very well. How are you, Dus?
I'm hanging in there, and I'm about to ask chat if they could hear you okay. Could you hear Chris okay, chat? Let us know in the chat over there. Real quick, the housekeeping. You know, NSF Live is our live show. A lot of the shows we do are actually, most of the shows we do are live. If you have a question for us over the course of the event, put it in chat. Tag us at NASASpaceflight. We've got some cool software here that'll bring your questions out. No way that we can get to all your questions. Kraken knows we try, but we're never able to get to all of them. So if we miss your question, well, it's not that we don't like you. It's that we can't get to all of them. But tag us in chat at NASASpaceflight. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Also, try to keep the questions relevant to what we're talking about. So if we're talking about Lucy, the asteroid hunter mission, and you're asking what the aft flaps on Starship are made of, well, we'll probably hold that question for later. But ask your questions. That's why it's a live show, so we can answer stuff. That's also why we have people really smart on with us, like Scott, so we can help answer some of the questions here. So without further ado, did I miss any housekeeping there? I think we got most of it, right?
I think we did.
All right. Well, let's get going with the show, shall we? What are we starting off with today?
Well, I was going to say, I think my question for Scott is, how excited were you for the start of this mission of Lucy this morning?
Well, I'm always excited for asteroid missions, but Lucy is absolutely wild because it's going to so many objects, and it's also going to objects in a region of the solar system we've never been to before. So, yeah, I love asteroids. I'm very excited. Lucy, by going out to the Trojans, is going to see a whole bunch of new fossils from the early, formation of the solar system and give us a lot of clues as to where we came from.
Yeah, and one of the things that really struck me about this, here's a replay of the liftoff, and I mean, it was from a technical standpoint, congratulations to ULA on this one, opening second of the first day of the launch window. And I do want to say major congratulations to ULA on that one, because the trajectory, Scott, was so weird that they had 21 days this year. They have 21 days almost exactly a year from now. And then the way that they had sort of related it to me was that's it. And I think what they meant was like, that's it from the Lucy mission perspective. But you were saying this morning too, that the orbital characteristics actually come around every 20 years for this type of a trajectory-ish.
Right. So,
like that.
So one of the cool things about Lucy is it's going to the Lagrange points, which are these locations in Jupiter's orbit 60 degrees ahead and 60 degrees behind. So it's going out to Jupiter, visiting some asteroids and falling back, and then swinging around and going and visiting this other block. So there's it has to go through some very careful navigation to be able to visit both these things and visit the same interesting objects during each pass. And there's a couple of really good papers on the internet showing how this orbit was refined and explaining how they came up to it. And so in this video, you can actually see it. This is in Jupiter's reference frame, so it appears to go backwards once the spacecraft reaches Jupiter's orbit. That's because it's at apogee or aphelion, and it's moving more slowly. And again, it swings out to the trailing Lagrange point, and it flies by a binary asteroid called Patroclus, which has a pair called Minutius. And those are interesting because they're like the largest objects that are going to be visited. And they are a binary object which may have come from the outer solar system during early formation. That was the one that Hal Levison was most interested in. And when they realized that they could get this on this trip, that made it all the more interesting. So they can actually get these kind of double flybys pretty much every year with different delta V requirements, but they can't necessarily visit the same objects. And Patroclus and Minutius, there's only an opportunity like every 10 years or so because it has to be passing through the ecliptic. So yeah, it's basically, if you want to get this great selection, you had to do it this year or next year.
See, I'm glad, like, out of the gate, you answered a question I had before I even asked it, because looking at this animation, it's like, wait a second, that doesn't look right. How does the orbit curve backwards like that? But it's because if you look at the bottom of the frame, Jupiter is fixed. You said this is from Jupiter's reference frame, right? And normally you don't have things doing crazy figure eights, turning their orbits around backwards throughout the solar system without some other sort of weird plotting or some other sort of influence. But here you can see that Jupiter was down there at the bottom, and as this animation goes, Jupiter doesn't actually move. And that's why it looks like you get this weird backwards orbit that seemingly changes direction. It's not actually changing. Nice. Somebody else draw it on the screen in red. It's not actually changing direction. It's just that plot was from Jupiter's reference frame. Before I even asked the question.
Yeah, because like the beauty part of this orbit is it's just a heliocentric orbit with the aphelion out at Jupiter's orbital distance and the perihelion at Earth's orbital distance, more or less. And then it sort of flings it in that last gravity assist into the stable orbit that it can be in for a few more years.
6-year orbit. The idea is that it's going to come back to Earth, 3 years after the end of the mission. They could potentially get another gravity assist and go to other places, since it'll still could be an operational spacecraft at this point.
Yeah. And here's the plot from a different, I guess, reference frame, Scott. It's from your video. It's okay if I use your video on the stream, right?
Yeah, I think you can do that.
That's permission, I think.
I probably just stole it from someone else.
So this is, like you said, Chris, it's just a heliocentric orbit, which means that Lucy's going around the sun. So when you plot it this way, where Jupiter's actually moving around the orbit, then you get what seems to be a more traditional looking plot here, right?
Yeah, and you actually see that it's the asteroids catching up with Lucy rather than Lucy flying by. That's because it's moving more slowly. But down the right side of that, you actually have the list of all the maneuvers that have been planned out. So Lucy actually does a fair amount of maneuvering. It has engines on board. It has about 1,800 meters per second of delta V. I'm not sure precisely. I had to dig around to find out what its propellant reserves are.
Yep.
So it has a main engine that is a Leros 1C and a bunch of smaller engines for attitude control from Aerojet Rocketdyne, and those are monopropellants. The Leros engine is a bipropellant engine using MON and hydrazine.
Okay.
So it has the hydrazine works for both the monoprop and the biprop systems.
Gotcha.
And yeah, they have to do all these correction maneuvers so they can visit as many asteroids as possible. It's going to visit 8 objects, although there's only 6 actual destinations. One's a binary, and the other one, they found a moon off it when they were trying to, figure out the exact location. They've done a lot of work trying to, pin down the exact locations of these. And there's been a whole Lucy associated occultations campaign, right? An occultation is where you are looking for a stellar eclipse where an asteroid passes in front of a star.
Right. Like blocks the light from the star.
Right. And so you can get incredibly accurate timings if you do this. Not only that, if you have a bunch of telescopes that watch it pass in front of a star, they'll all give you different durations, and you can figure out the shape of the object Even though all you can see is just a star going on and off.
Right.
Because they actually did that exactly what you're talking about, to try and figure out 2014 MU-69.
Yep.
Where New Horizons flew by it, and they did this whole string of stellar occultations where they had Sophia out over the Pacific, and then they had the string of observatories in South America.
Yeah.
And that's when we
observatories,
began
right?
to,
A bunch of people
right.
with basically consumer grade telescopes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. We're so used to amazing things like Hubble Space Telescope and James Webb, but they were doing really important research with a consumer telescope with a camera on it, because all you needed to see was a star going on and off.
I mean, you're sending people outside with their cell phones. You're like on Twitter, hey, everybody go out and try to take a picture of the moon or whatever. You've done that before, right?
Measured the distance
like a
to the moon using cell phones on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing that technology's gotten to the level of, I'm trying to figure out what my cell phone is, but we can do that with consumer-grade telescopes. Yeah, there you go. Consumer-grade telescopes, consumer cell phones, like whatever. Not that, oh, ditch James Webb. Why don't we just launch an iPhone 13? That's not really
aperture.
How it works.
Lots of
aperture.
Yeah. Well, so Scott, one thing that people are asking a lot of actually about this trajectory and about the spacecraft, and I'm going to choose Connor's question here. You have all these Earth gravity assists, but why couldn't you just put Lucy on a more powerful rocket? Why couldn't you just slap some solid rockets onto the side of the Atlas V and send it straight to the Lagrange point? Why couldn't we do that?
Well, we could. It would just cost more. So next year's launch opportunity. So next year, October 15th, it's actually going to fly by the Earth again, and it's going to kick it up into a 2-year orbit. Now, they could have gone directly into that 2-year orbit next year by taking the Atlas V and slapping more boosters on it.
Yep.
But, by going out into space and subtly changing your trajectory so you come back and get a gravity assist from the Earth, you save having those extra boosters on it. And 2 years after that, it's going to come back. And then you would need a much bigger rocket to go directly out to Jupiter's orbit in a single boost. It's not impossible, but you're talking about trying to save, do things in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah, and also if you do that, you potentially go whizzing past the asteroid faster as well. You might have to.
No, because none of the
so?
asteroids are in the first 2 gravity assists. They're not flying by any asteroids. The first asteroid is Donald Johansen, and that is on the way out to the Trojans.
Gotcha.
But I think that's I think that's probably what you were thinking of there, is like at a certain point it does just become about the velocity, and
right,
because you're trying to manage the orbital characteristics as you cruise through this location. You don't want to swing too far past out them, things like that, right?
Gotcha.
Like in terms of how you manage it, Scott.
Yeah,
but
Scott,
there's a great paper that discusses all these criteria. They didn't want to fly by some objects too fast because it would constrain other things later on.
Right.
I mean, from a trajectory point of view, actually, DART, which is launching next month, is almost more interesting, because it was originally, the plan was to save money. It would be launched into a geostationary transfer orbit with another satellite. And then it would use its ion thrusters to move it itself out into space and eventually hit its target. But then when they bid for the launch, SpaceX came along and said, "Oh, we'll give it a dedicated launch."
Gotcha.
So it's just being boosted out into its, into its interplanetary trajectory. And they're going to fire up the ion engine just to show that it works, but it's not going to do any real maneuvering with it.
Okay.
And that's the one where like they have the little CubeSats that will deploy to monitor the impact, but DART
just the one,
is like the
Lycia
camera.
Cube.
Yeah, but DART, like it doesn't have science instruments because it's the impactor. Like that's the whole point.
It is a kinetic impactor, but you're going to have Lycia Cube, which is an Italian 12U CubeSat that's going to fly by. And then
it's
years
Hera
from
that
now,
has 2
Hera's
of them,
going to
right?
have, And Hera is actually derived from another mission proposal called AIDA, which was originally supposed to go there before DART did the impact, but ESA couldn't get funding. And then they got funding for Hera, so they're going afterwards.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So question here from Lucas158, wanting to know what about the science instruments on Lucy? What is it using to actually investigate these asteroids?
So,
and I think the basic answer is it basically stole a lot of instruments from previous missions and put
it's still
Lucy
some
at the front of
inspiration,
them.
yeah. Yeah, you've got L Laurie, L Ralph, and L Tess, which are from New Horizons, and Osiris-Rex.
I think we've got a NASA webpage that has a bunch of instruments from Lucy on here, but these look like animations and stuff. Let me see if I can find what you're talking. Yeah, like so there's L Laurie right there.
L Laurie is they're multi-spec. It's basically a monochrome camera with you can zoom in really close, right? So long focal length. So this is what they use to get maps of the terrain and stuff on Pluto. So they're having the same thing here. They'll be able to zoom in on these asteroids because they're flying by at like hundreds of kilometers away.
Right.
But they're going to be able to zoom in and see terrain. And that is multispectral. So it's just black and white. It doesn't do anything other than take high quality images. They can't have it in color because they're a long way from the sun. It's dark and they're moving fast and they want to take images as quickly as possible.
Right.
So the other instrument is L Ralph. Right? That's the other major camera.
That's the next one
down.
That's
two cameras.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's two cameras in there. So there's MVIC, which is the multispectral visual imager something or other imaging camera.
Right.
That's the color camera. And that basically is going to work with L Laurie to put the color in the images. But it can also do, obviously, science and stuff by doing spectroscopy. And then there's a spectrometer in there, which I think it's an infrared spectrometer that will basically look at the spectra of the rocks and let them figure out what materials it's made of.
Right.
So there's like a beam splitter in there that sends the same light from the main optics to both those different cameras. So you sort of get a 2-for-1 there, because the infrared, you don't want that going to your optical and vice versa.
Cool.
And the third one is LTES, which is the thermal emission spectrometer. And what that is doing is it's more like a thermal camera, and it's taking spectra. And again, what they're really interested there is the thermal inertia of materials, because asteroids, one of the things about them is they're very porous. And if you have very porous, loosely bound material, the heat doesn't conduct down through the surface as quickly, so the surface heats up faster. So that's like your thermal inertia, is how quickly the surface reacts. And that was one of the ways they could analyze the surface of like Bennu when Osiris-Rex was there,
right,
to figure out what was like gravel and what were actually solid rocks and things like that. So that instrument, incidentally, has a big diamond in it, a 39 millimeter, 1 millimeter thick diamond, which is used in the beam splitter. So Lucy is indeed going to be in the sky with diamonds.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
But you mean an actual, like a diamond, like an wedding ring diamond? An industrial diamond.
Perfect diamond.
Actually, probably better than a wedding ring diamond then. But
yes,
not like a shape of something that happens to be a diamond. It's an actual diamond.
Yes.
No kidding.
It's magic.
Do we make
so
the
those
diamond?
are the three main instruments, and of course, I'll be doing science based on like Doppler shift to measure the masses of these objects as they fly by.
Do you know if is that a lab created? You said optically perfect, so I would assume that's something we like made in a lab to make it perfect, right? As opposed to somebody went out and dug it out of the ground.
Special coatings to minimize reflections.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. You can go and read all the papers on all these things, and it just goes over my head. But I sort of nod along and pretend that I know.
Nice. But to say it correctly, you'd have to say Lucy in the sky with diamond.
Well, I don't know. There might be more than one diamond in the whole thing. I think if they look, they can probably find another one.
Find something else? Nice.
Yeah.
I've got tons of different stuff to show here, so if we just want to answer a couple more questions, we could probably do the entire show just on Lucy, right? But
well, I mean, there's other things that happened this week.
I know.
You know, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. There was there's a fantastic cover version of that by William Shatner.
The one and only William Shatner.
Yeah.
I think we're definitely going to talk about the captain's trip to space here.
It's actually on the list next.
We can stay on Lucy as long as you like.
Yeah. But well, there are a couple of other questions that I know are everyone listening would really love your take on and your explanation on, Scott. So this morning we had a rather long launch window for the interplanetary injection, and ULA was very vocal about that being in part because of the RAN steering capability of the Atlas vehicle. And a lot of people are asking us in chat if you could please explain RAN steering to them.
Okay.
All right.
So RAN is RAAN, right? Wait, is it? Right ascension of the ascending node. Now, if you imagine you know what longitude is, right? You go around the Earth, right? So right ascension is just longitude, but it's fixed. It's fixed in time. So as the Earth rotates, longitude moves with it. Right ascension just remains fixed, and it's pointing at a place, I think, the first point of Aries. So anyway, the orbit, where it crosses the equator, right, where it crosses from below the equator to above the equator,
right,
that's the ascending node. And that point where it crosses, you measure the right ascension. So the right ascension of the ascending node. So the orbit that they needed it to be in had to cross the equator at this exact point. Now, that would normally mean you'd wait for your launch site to rotate until it's exactly underneath this, and then you would launch and go exactly into that plane. But if your rocket can steer left or right, then it can actually hit this orbital plane. So by allowing the rocket to steer using closed loop guidance, it can hit the orbital plane, and therefore you can widen your orbital launch window by minutes. 7.5 minutes is actually quite reasonable, I believe, for Atlas with RAN steering.
I'm going to give this a try real quick. And Scott, tell me if I've got this like terribly wrong, right? I'm going to give it a try.
Okay.
You can tell.
Right.
We're going to do some DOS art here. So you're
this is
saying
where we need Kerbal Space Program.
I know. I should just boot it up real quick. That would take forever. So you have, the Earth, and then you have the equator of the Earth that sort of goes around like that, and then there's the bottom of the Earth. It's an oblate spheroid, clearly when I draw it. But
pear-shaped.
There you go. You were talking about when the orbit crosses the equator, going from bottom to top. That's the ascending node, right?
Yep.
And so what they're saying, if I understand correctly, is eventually you want to end up in this trajectory, right? And to get to there, normally you'd want to launch from right here. But with this RAN, the right steering, you could launch from here and sort of turn into it, or you could wait a little bit longer. You can launch from here and turn into it. But instead of having to launch at that one exact moment, and I'm exaggerating this clearly, but you could launch here early in the window and sort of turn into that orbit. I say turn, that's probably the wrong term. Or you could launch here. Or you could launch in the middle of the window. You could launch near the end of the window. And I'm exaggerating again. But multiple parts as the Earth sort of rotates around, right? I got it rotating the right way. If not, it's upside down. But just as the Earth rotates, because you can sort of turn your rocket and tweak that trajectory into exactly what you want the final trajectory to be. Is that sort of a summary, kind of?
That is it. Basically, that's it. And, there's limits based upon how capable your rocket is.
Gotcha. So if you didn't have that and you launched super early, you may end up in an orbit that went like this. And if you launched super late and you didn't have that, you'd end up in an orbit that looks like this. But this right here is the important part where you're doing that sort of little bit of a tweak to the trajectory to end up in the right orbit, even though the position of the Earth isn't exactly right.
Yeah. You got to imagine the Earth is moving sideways at, faster than the speed of sound.
Yep.
And if you want to get exactly on the trajectory, you need to make corrections for that.
Yeah. I almost ended up drawing a Death Star there, it looks like, which is kind of cool.
It did, yeah.
Put that.
There,
you've got the plans. You've got the plans.
Nice.
Quick.
All right. Good one.
So one last one on Lucy from everyone. And this is a question that we get a lot too. What's the likelihood that Lucy would be hit by something or accidentally run into something that we just haven't seen yet in these Lagrange points as she's flying through them?
It depends on the size of the object, but let me tell you, we call it space because it's mostly space.
Yeah.
If it was full of stuff, we'd call it stuff.
Stuff.
I mean, yes, this is something absolutely to be concerned about. And one of the things they're going to do as they're approaching is they're going to be using LORRI to scan the area and look for ring systems which may not be visible from the ground. It might not be visible from the ground because the illumination is different in space. So yeah, it's not likely that we'll find macroscopic bodies. For example, we found a 1 kilometer moon near one of the asteroids, but there could be even smaller objects there that we just cannot see. And at that point, it's not entirely impossible that we hit centimeter sized or whatever gravel, depending on what's there. if you remember when
ideal.
they went to Osiris-Rex, they saw like gravel getting kicked off into space. Now, if you were flying by at several kilometers per second, those would be like incredibly powerful bullets.
Yep.
So hopefully by not going too close, they will reduce the chance of hitting them, but it's not zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not going to do a dart and hit a macroscopic body, because they're going to be able to find those
Right.
from a long way out.
They could see those, and they could do a little bit of a maneuver to miss it if they identified it. That's why they're going to scan for it. But there's stuff out there that we wouldn't be able to detect. If it goes ping through a solar array, maybe not a big deal. If it goes ping through the camera, that could probably be a mission-ending sort of thing. So
I mean, that happened. Not mission ending, but if you remember, G-Auto, its camera was destroyed by a fragment of Halley, and it then had another mission after that.
No kidding. So camera ending, not mission ending, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Camera ending.
Very specific there. Last thing, I said I was going to mention this because this is something that I always think is really cool. But you can see right now on DSN Now that out at Madrid, part of the Deep Space Network is actually communicating with Lucy. They've got 2 dishes out there pointed at it. And this is just a cool website. I'm going to link it up in chat real quick because it's the sort of thing where it's like, oh, yeah, go over there and you look at it. It's like, oh, wow, it's talking to Lucy or it's talking to a Mars rover or whatever. And the initial acquisition, like the phone home from Lucy, came down to the DSN, right, Scott? I think it came straight down to the DSN.
I believe so.
Okay, I think
I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, there was a tweet where it didn't acquire exactly when they thought it was, but it was a little bit earlier, and the solar arrays were still deploying, but the DSN picked it up or something like that. I'd have to go find that specific information. But
sometimes that makes sense. Although the DSN field of view, if you're the closer you are to Earth, the less you are likely to be on the DSN. And some missions, and I think the reason Scott you hedged there is the same reason I would have. Is like some missions actually make contact with other ground stations in Australia that just aren't the DSN.
Well, I mean, it went around the Earth and then headed off into space, so I don't know where it actually was when it performed its burn. But I think it moved more or less radially outwards from the Earth. So given that it was nighttime when they were firing, I think that it's possible that DSN West Coast might have picked it up.
Gotcha.
I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Chris, anything else? Do we have any door hangers on Lucy there? Or 15 million questions.
I know there's so many questions about Lucy, but I think they're going to be equal number of questions with everything else that we have. One that I'll hit really quick. We do have a question about how close Lucy will get to these asteroids as she goes by them. A lot of them she will pass about 1,000 kilometers away from them, and a couple of them she'll pass a little bit closer in the 600 to 800 kilometer range.
Gotcha.
When you're flying by at high speed, it's a sort of trade-off, because the further away you are, the more slowly it will move relative to you, but the less detail you're going to see from that distance. If you want to get in really close, then you're tracking it as it goes. Right.
That's right.
I mean, imagine like you're riding in a car or something and you look out the window, and if there's a tree that's a mile away, the tree's like barely moving. But if the tree's right by the side of the road, it goes past the window. So
and it's got a blur, you're going to have to deal with that in your instruments.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So if you're interested in learning more about Lucy, of course, there are lots of resources. Scott's done a video, of course.
I'm told it's quite good. One of my commenters was some guy called Tori Bruno.
There you go.
There you go.
So there's a link to Scott's video. I just put it, K-Space Academy, into the YouTube chat there. And then we also did a video. NASASpaceflight put together a video trying out some new stuff. We've got one of those as well. And, the launch broadcast, you did tons of Q&A live during the broadcast last night / this morning, right, Chris?
Yeah, I noticed all sorts of mistakes.
I
I was in chat trying to correct you. Like, you forgot that Juno had an Earth gravity assist. What was with that?
I did just kind of see it. Well,
I couldn't sleep last night for some reason.
There were so many mistakes you couldn't sleep? That's terrible. I'm kidding. Sorry. So anyways, moving right along, we do have more topics to talk about here. We'll grab some other things. Let me do this real quick. A bunch of super chats coming through. I'm not going to try to get every one of them, but Multi-Space Industries, thank you so much for the super chat there. Says a big hello to Scott and shout out to Chris for making it after this morning's lunch, because it was an early AM lunch. Thank you so much, Moldy. California Adventures as well. We appreciate your support. Dalm? Wow. Dogger says, thank you for becoming a red team. Oh, that's joining the membership program. Thank you, Dom, for joining us there. A lot of different super chats. I'm not going to get through them all. Sitz Fliegen, thank you so much. There's California Vineyards again. Gimbal, Tim W, David Dean. We appreciate all the support, y'all. That's why we can keep doing this. So thank you so much for the super chats. What's next on the list?
Well, Scott, I think you had the best segue to that. I mean, if we're talking about Lucy, I think we should talk about the man who has one of the amazing spoken word versions of that song.
Wow.
Who finally made it to space.
Yes, Stuff, the final frontier. Oh, wait, sorry, Space, the final frontier.
Talking, of course, about the NS-18 launch from Blue Origin here earlier this week, carrying, who are we talking about?
The one and only William Shatner.
Captain
James T. Kirk.
Yeah. So takes us away. This was like, all right, cool, yeah, all right, flying William Shatner to space, whatever. And then they landed, and then William Shatner started talking, and it became an entire different event for me.
Yeah, it was transformative. Yes. He was the transformed man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was the title of his album, for those who don't get
it. So what was going on here? I mean, was this just a PR stunt? Was it actually cool? Like, how were people feeling?
Wasn't it a documentary company that paid for this? Because he'd previously said he didn't want to pay the price for a ticket on one of these flights. And somebody has come forward and And
they definitely made a point of saying that he was not a paying passenger.
Right. Because they said, like, you know, this person and this person, and then our two paying passengers. Like, they kept introducing them throughout the webcast and our paying passengers, like drawing a line between the non-paying, the employee, and then William Shatner, and then the two people that actually paid, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and they had like a helicopter there providing imagery, getting all that. So I think there was somebody putting some high-quality production value behind this.
Oh, well, that helicopter buzzes Jack every time he goes out there. I think that thing's always there. On the side of the road, there's a helicopter there looking at Jack while we set up our cameras. But
I mean, but like, to your question, I think, Das, like to me, like, yeah, like I was sort of with you. Like, it was, I wanted, like, beforehand, like I was kind of wanting to feel more happy about one of the main Star Trek cast members going up into space, even though other people who have acted in Star Trek have been before.
Right.
But
they've been to space generally in the form of ashes.
Yeah.
Like James Doohan.
James Doohan on the ISS. Mae Jemison.
I was more. Mae Jemison is who I was more thinking of, and Terry Virts and Mike Fink as well. But yeah, I had been I kind of wanted to feel more excited about it in the lead up to it. And I mean, I definitely breathed a sigh of relief when he landed, and that they said, that we've heard from all of them and everything, and they're fine. But yeah, it was when he started talking, and I mean that I don't know. Like, I mean, I know people had different reactions to this, but for him, I don't know. That seemed an incredibly genuine reaction in many ways.
There was a very awkward moment. Like, just to jump, I'm actually going to fast forward here, and we're going to get over to it. But they landed safely. They get the crew out there. You got Jeff Bezos in his blue suit there.
Who's turned up, like, with his flight suit, even though he's not flying.
We were speculating, like, is he going to jump on the capsule with him, or what's the deal here? Like, why is he got
me with you?
I think he was just doing the normal, astronauts go to a speaking appearance, and they're always wearing their blue jumpsuit, right? And I think he was doing the wearing the blue jumpsuit to the event. But anyways, they got there, all the cameras and everything. The people are all crowding around, and let me see if we can get up here. Yeah. We get people starting to hop out, high fives all around. I'm not going to play the audio here because we all know what happened. William Shatner started to talk, and everybody in the background is screaming, right? Because they just came back from the edge of space, and no one could hear what William Shatner was saying. Is this a failing of the production company or the guy holding the mic or what the deal was? We just couldn't hear what William Shatner was saying, and it was so awkward. Like the Dead Space, after I say it's so awkward, and wait for somebody else to say something.
We were trying to exaggerate that. Yeah, it was. Yeah. And then Jeff, like, goes away and he's like popping champagne, but eventually they get the audio on him, and
he
starts acting like, well, William Shatner.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Like, I'm
Like,
going to say
there
William
was.
Shatner is an actor that has a certain way of acting.
Like,
And I think that he felt that he had to play a part here.
it did.
And it worked so well.
It seemed like he started like he rehearsed this bit of a speech, right? And he comes out of the capsule, and Jeff Bezos is standing there. And this was the thing that got me. Like, Jeff looks away. And if we play the audio on this, we're not set up to play the audio, but when Jeff looked away like this, it's because none of us could hear what William Shatner was saying. It was cheers and screaming in the background, and you couldn't hear what Captain Kirk had to say after he came back from space. And what I got from this was Jeff looked like he was about to turn around and tell people to shut up so that you could hear what the captain was saying.
Give him that look that he has, right?
He looked annoyed, and then he turns back around, and he's like, what the heck are you supposed to do?
Except he then interrupted Shatner to then grab champagne.
Yes.
So like he was also part of the of creating the awkwardness in this moment. And
I know.
And I agree with both of you, like that it started to sound like, and I don't know if it's true, but like it started to sound at first like there was a bit of a rehearsed element to it, but then it got real.
But then the awkward thing happened. Then you couldn't hear because everybody was screaming in the background, and Jeff turns around, literally looks annoyed at the people screaming behind him. Well, what are you going to do? Turn around and be like, hey, keep it down, people who just paid me to go to the edge of space, right? You can't say that. That's not what Jeff is going to say.
To be fair, yes, the captain is speaking. Be
quiet.
It's
Captain on deck.
What a lousy situation to be in. And did he handle it right? I jokingly said, he's like, give me some champagne. And they hand him this bottle of champagne. And to shut them up, he hoses them down with champagne. And then everybody's quiet. And then we can hear Captain Kirk talk. Like, was that awkward, or did that bring the situation under control? I don't know.
I mean, but I mean, it got his afterward. It did get to me, like what he was saying and how he was saying it was fascinating to me, and the emotion, like it was. I mean, I said this before, but to me, it was the human reaction I'd been waiting for.
Yep.
Very much so.
Yeah. I mean, and of course that's going to play great for Blue Origin.
Yeah.
But it was the most human reaction I've seen yet.
Yeah. It felt to me like William Shatner had something that he wanted to say, and he got off, and he's like, here's the things that I want to say. But then this super...
I don't want to forget this. So I don't want to lose this moment.
Yeah, this is my chance to say this impactful thing to make sure everybody knows what I just... And he thought about this in advance. This is my read on the situation.
Yeah.
And then this super awkward thing happens. And look at William Shatner right here. He's literally got sort of his head down and his hands in his pocket, and he's sort of looking off the side. He looks bummed that there's this champagne thing and stuff going on. But the consummate professional... he recovers from it, and then all of a sudden, it's not the thing that we've practiced. It's William Shatner tearing up, like crying, talking about life and death and the thin blue line that it takes no time to punch through. And I shut up, and I just sat there listening to it like, whoa. Yeah. I got goosebumps.
I don't remember Kirk ever tearing up in Trek.
No. Or any of the roles William Shatner played. I mean, that was sort of the other thing that got me, is like if you have been a fan of William Shatner and you've followed him through his various roles, you really know that this man just sort of gets in front of the camera and is himself with just different names, and we've never seen that.
It's the way the universe works, right? I'm sort of waxing poetic about this, but yes, he could have gotten off and everything could have been well prepared, and the mic is here ready, and everybody be quiet, we have a speech to make, and that didn't work out in this super awkward thing, and the champagne bottle on the ground, and like, come on, I'm sure somebody will pick it up for him. But after that awkward break, it became super real, because you got William Shatner there with his hands in his pockets, and then William Shatner tearing up and talking about his experiences, and it's like, whoa, this is not the script. This is for real.
And I mean, for me, I mean, like I've said I would go, right? I mean, hands down, but that's what made me want to go.
Yeah.
I hope it made others too.
Yeah.
Or that others at least took notice of exactly what he said.
Yeah. The overview effect. It's a real
Yeah.
thing.
Just
Yeah.
so many not sound bites, that's the really terrible way to put it, but just when he talked about how thin the atmosphere was, and he literally starts talking about life and death, like down here is life and up here is death, and I'm sitting there like, whoa, dude, we sit here and we cheer about, oh, well, astronaut, not an astronaut, da-da-da-da. Nobody even cares about that. He's talking about the difference between planet Earth, which gives us all life, and the cold, dark, black death of space, and it's like, dude, wow, I don't think a marketing person wrote that for him, you know?
Yeah, that doesn't sound like marketing speak.
Yeah. I don't think
to call the place you're trying to send people death.
Exactly.
No, I
Exactly.
don't think that was written by the market, or at least I would hope not.
it was absolutely real. It was very real, and it impacted me just to sort of hear what he was saying. I don't know. Am I going off on that too much? I don't know. Chad, y'all.
I don't think you can go off on it too much. I think it's clearly an honest reaction.
Yep. I hope I never get over this. Did he say, I hope I never get over this?
I hope I never get over this. Yeah, that's
God.
That was the line.
Yep.
That was the line. But yeah, and we got a couple of other little nuggets in this webcast too, but earlier on in the webcast, right, where we got some videos, some BE4s being fired. We got some views of some technology. And Scott, what did it feel like to finally see some of that?
You mean finally see a closer to production model BE4? I mean, it was great that we actually got that on the stand, because like a lot of the stuff with BE4 has been not just designing and building and testing the engine, but making it so they can produce them at the cost. And those, goals are not always orthogonal, or not always in parallel. Sometimes they're fighting against each other. Yeah, I mean, where's my engines? They're the engines. Let's get them on rockets now, right?
Yeah.
Right.
These were still, like, the engines they show were not flight hardware yet.
No, they're still, yeah. I mean, so a lot of these engines that are on test stands, they're going to have a lot of extra sensors on them, because they want to document all the behavior, find out anything that's out of spec, and once they can keep everything stable, they can start taking out the sensors that aren't essential. Because, you want to simplify engines as much as possible. I mean, sure, the price they're paying, you have as many sensors as you want, but it adds mass and adds complexity, and you only have limited telemetry.
Yep. And we see that a lot of the time with development engines. Like, I know Tori's talked about that before, where it's like, this thing is wired to the gills. We've seen it on the Raptors as well, running around Starbase. It's like, man, there's all sorts of stuff on that. And then you see
it's not just wiring, but extra plumbing has to go in there just for the sensors.
Yep. And you see this, and then you see a clean version, like a production version, where, okay, all the extra sensors to get all the data possible, we don't need that anymore. We've got the data, so here's like a, not stripped down, but a ready-to-go version. You're like, wow, is that the same engine?
Simplified, productionized.
Yep.
Yeah.
So good that we got some of that, those visuals. I think somebody at Blue Origin,
I'm so glad,
knew they needed to give it to us. Saw some from the factory as well. Wasn't there some stuff from the factory? Let's see here. This was...
Yeah, I actually have this glass here from the BE4 team.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Back there at the Cape.
Oxrich staged combustion reusable rocket engine.
Nice. It says that on the glass?
Yeah.
Nice.
So you can tell it's the audience it's aimed at.
Yep.
Actual rocket scientists.
This was a tweet from Michael Seeley with some shots in the door over at that big Willy Wonka and the Rocket Factory down at the Cape. Lot of memes and jokes out there. Oh, yeah, that big empty building. Oh, they threw everything, all their tooling away and stuff like that. And then we also got some, this is the tweet, but we got some shots from Blue Origin as well showing hardware in there too, didn't we?
That's right.
So
yeah, that's their big that's their big test stand, and they're like where they can do pressurized testing and a few other things. That's literally right across the street from the entrance to the KSC Visitor Center.
It's just got a huge concrete pathway, and it's like rocket rolls right out there, rolls in the main gate of the Cape, and then over to launch pads.
Unfortunately, you can't leave cars and cameras parked there pointing at the building the whole time.
Yes. Sometimes I wonder. And then we also caught, what was this? This was from Twitter as well. This was a Vulcan Pathfinder rolling past Lucy. So, not a lot.
That's right. The old and the new.
Yeah. Are those engines hanging off the bottom of it there?
I believe those
Enhance.
are the Pathfinder BE4s. Yeah.
Pathfinder, like fit check engines, not flight engines.
Oh
but
gosh, yeah,
Yeah, they'll have
yeah.
roughly the right mass and dimensions and fit check and everything. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And the Atlas also hangs down like really far into its launch mount. Like when it's
Yep.
got solid rockets on it, you can see the solid rocket nozzles sticking out from below the base of the mobile launcher there.
Yep,
Even for
yep.
Atlas. So yeah,
And it's
not uncommon.
it goes up onto the pad because that's a raised concrete structure. It rolls up the hill, and then it's got the flame trench diverter and stuff underneath it, like out the exit. So, oh look, that's Jack's old Twitter handle right there. His old Twitter profile picture.
Oh yes, it is.
It's from the warning signs. From the warning signs
way.
that the pads out there was his old profile picture. It's a different profile picture now. Anyways, I digress.
But yeah, old and the new out there, because yeah, the Vulcan completed its dual methane and oxygen cryogenic testing out at Pad 40.
Yep. Couple questions on Blue Origin real quick. Did we get some of
41.
those?
Sorry.
Wait, what? Oh,
I said the wrong pad.
Oh, the pad.
So I need to correct that.
Scott, that's your job. You're not in chat right now. You can just say it out loud when he gets it wrong.
I'm a disappointment, Scott. I know.
I
I'll go
know,
study
I
more.
Oh, hey, I wanted to get this real quick as well. Let's grab a question or two or three out of the chat here. Back to Blue Origin and the NS-18 flight. This shot.
There's the shot. Yeah.
Did everybody see this shot? And it was William Shatner looking out the window, and this is like just at the end of the video there, and you see him just sort of, I'm not doing backflips, I'm not throwing M&Ms at people, I'm just looking out the window.
Right.
And
Turns around and like says wow, or
Yeah.
like turns around with this look of like, what are you guys doing?
You get
like,
people flying
And
around.
she
and-
was like, "This is nuts," or whatever. What was she?
Yeah,
That was what she said, right?
I'm gonna play the whole
Yeah.
video here, but playing with candy and he's
There's
still
a tiny dove satellite flying around. That's
Yeah.
it there.
Little
See it going
bear.
up the middle?
Yep,
That's
going
a
up the
dove.
middle. And then William Shatner he gets out of his seat and he starts looking out the window. And at some point he turns around and it's like, what are these other crazy people doing? Look outside. It's what you get from the experience. Yeah, right here.
that.
Wow. He just turns
You're
around and says,
seeing
wow.
this?
God, wow. You just replay it over and over again.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, if you want to experience zero G, this is not the way to do it.
Yes.
You do it in a
No.
parabolic flight. You'll have multiple flights. You'll have chance to get used to it,
Yep.
learn it. Right. This you're gonna have a lot less room to move,
Yep.
and you have a very limited time, and the view is gonna be the main attraction.
Yep.
And the fact that you're in space.
If you want to fly like Superman and do backflips and stuff like that, those zero-G flights, maybe the way to
Yeah.
go. You get a lot more zero-G time, cost a lot less. No
I was
wind.
mean,
pointing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said on these suborbital flights, like you wouldn't be able to pry me from the window
Yeah.
to do tricks.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a punk song from the 70s called "Where's Captain Kirk," and it's about 2.5 minutes long,
Yeah.
and they spend less time in space than even that.
No kidding. It's just that spoke to me as well when you got that shot of him just looking out the window and everybody else doing their flips and stuff like that. You want to do flips, take a zero-G flight or something like that. You want to get up there and see the curve of the Earth and the thin blue line that protects us from space and all that sort of stuff. Well, there's some other YouTube videos you might enjoy. Sorry. Questions? Did we get a couple questions there, Chris?
Yeah. Yes. So one person was asking about New Shepard. They're saying that New Shepard seems to always have about 30 to 45 minutes of brief holds. Is this an indication of a problem? And I think the answer to that is no. This is an indication of when you have a countdown that doesn't have built-in holds to begin with, and you have very specific times that events need to occur. Like for instance, we've seen in past New Shepard flights that T-minus 45 minutes is when the astronauts need to be, the vehicles actually need to be like leaving the astronaut complex,
Right.
or whatever. And if they're not leaving, the clock has to hold until the vehicles actually start moving. This time that hold was for weather and not for the crew, but then you also have to have the hatch closed at a certain time. So if you're a little late, getting everyone in and getting everyone strapped in, you have to hold the clock because you haven't built that time actually into your schedule.
Yeah.
So
New Shepard's windows, interestingly, are mostly built around the weather at the launch site rather than having to rendezvous with anything. And they've basically they shifted it because the weather wasn't going to be good.
Yep. Just the winds 24 hours in advance, they had to push it back a day. So it's the interesting part of it. Like if you're trying to do a high cadence tourism flight like that, you're not trying to rendezvous with the ISS or anything. Maybe you do have a little bit more flexibility, but still the winds out there in South Texas, especially or Southwest Texas actually, the winds tend to pick up, and sometimes they sort of have to get that done. But you've heard us say we're now earning a planned hold. Like you've heard us say on ULA broadcasts and stuff like that, a planned hold, and you're like, why is there a planned hold? Well, there you go. If there isn't a planned hold and you need a little bit of flexibility there, it makes it look like something's wrong. Like, oh, geez, what's wrong? They're in another hold. If you just plan your hold in advance, you can act like you meant to do that.
Yeah. I'm going to say, I think that the New Shepard, the primary weather constraint is actually landing the capsule because it's under parachute and it'll blow off and end out way outside their thing. It's interesting that between Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, the two suborbital companies, neither of them have launch or flight architectures that are particularly amenable to rapid launch cadence, right? Because they need to recover the parts and put them all back together. And, you know, they can't handle the winds. And Virgin Galactic, they have to take off the engine and bolt on a new engine. Like, that's, I don't know. I think there's still room for a real suborbital high cadence design.
Yeah. Like maybe one craft that could take off from a runway, jump into space,
power land on its own,
power land back down again, refuel it, put some more passengers on board, up to their gate ramp like you do at the airport. We don't have that vehicle yet. It doesn't, like Skylon or whatever, doesn't exist. Skylon's supposed to go to orbit if they ever make it.
Yeah, but Skylon's not that vehicle either.
Exactly. I was trying to think if we've even designed anything like that, but we don't even really have that design yet. A couple other questions. We get a couple more there, Chris?
Yes, a question for you specifically, Scott. Someone is wanting your... Yeah, I know, it's weird, right?
Who are these people?
I know. Well, they don't want my view on this. They want Scott's view on when do you think New Glenn will fly?
Oh, God. I mean, I think that with the turmoil, 2022 is seeming like not happening. 2023, maybe?
Like earliest, if everything else...
I don't know. Like, God, I honestly, I'd like to say that I don't have any insight into the company that's I shouldn't have, but I don't have any secret leaks, but I don't get good feeling for their timing prospects.
Yeah. I mean, because just the BE4s are next year at the absolute earliest, to be ready for a Vulcan flight. And,
And we know the rest of Vulcan already exists. Like, we've seen Vulcan hardware rolling around. And
I mean, we saw that fairing. But I think Blue Origin really needs to focus on those engines because they have to be productionized so that they can actually sell them at the cost that they promised.
Right.
And ULA is not going to be happy if they have to keep changing the design around to make it cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah. That's very true.
Scott, I think you opened the door to this one. Quick, what's Scott's favorite space-related song?
There you go.
God, there's so many of them. Obviously, I love Rocket Man, right? That's pretty cool. And Life on Mars. But I mean, there's like techno tunes like the Hail Bop, which is a great, dance floor thing. Oh man, yeah. And then there's the entire Planet Suite.
Like, wow, yeah, okay. Like, what's it? Holst.
Yes, Gustav Holst. The Planet Suite. Yes.
I played that in high school.
Yes. Oh man.
And I still listen to it.
Major Tom, obviously, like Space Oddity, Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. And yes, people asking, I am a DJ. Just, but it's a bit long time ago. No, you could just go on forever.
Yeah, I'm partial to the NSF theme song. So
there you go. And by the way, I really like putting on a lot of test shot Starfish music in the backdrop.
There you go. Cool.
And I've been sort of got this plan that one day I'll make a feature length movie of just rocket porn with that music.
Nice.
Just let something we can put up on a big screen and have the music running.
Yep. Like talk to a museum, get the IMAX, and let's just crank the speakers up and like hang out and watch the rocket highlight reel.
Indeed. Well, I mean, I know we've got like a lot of other topics here too.
Oh yeah.
Yes, we'd better get going.
I mean, know what time it is
this week, and I know everyone's waiting for Starship. I think I want to wait one more.
We're going to talk about Starship.
That's okay. Yeah.
Other big suborbital news, huh?
I was actually not going to skip that one.
Wait.
But since you said it,
okay.
Yeah, Unity 23's flight with a Virgin Galactic delayed very significantly into like late next year.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to say in the release that it had nothing to do with the defect in the component that they had announced last month. But I mean, remember too, like this is the flight that deviated and violated the airspace closure notices, that violated the company's own internal safety policies for the lights that went off
because
in the cabin.
Boss was on board.
Yeah, this delay was not the surprise. The surprise to me was actually the insistence a couple of weeks ago that this was going to go forward in Unity 23. So the delay was not a surprise in this regard. But a significant delay here for Virgin Galactic and their suborbital commercial plans.
Yeah. So real quick summary on that. Remember, there was the whole space race thing. Who's going to make it there first? And then they moved up their date to beat Jeff Bezos's first
and then
flight.
Put the boss on board.
They put the boss on board. Yep. Richard Branson's on board. They do the flight, and then come to find out afterwards there were multiple problems with the flight. Like you said, Chris, violating the airspace, the problems with the warning lights and stuff like that. Some of the staff from the company actually no longer with the company. And then we get a release from Virgin Galactic saying, a lot of spin in there, but saying, oh, well, we're going to go and make improvements to the vehicle, and we'll let you know when we're going to fly again. Yeah. But
if you want to find out about...
you go.
That's the book right now.
Yep, let's make that bigger. There you go.
Test gods.
Test gods, yes.
And I mean, to that point, like, now, in some fairness to Virgin Galactic, these upgrades were things that were planned.
Yes.
But what you're saying there, Das, I think is exactly that. Like reading behind that press release, that there is something else going on here,
right,
and that it was majorly advantageous for them to stop.
Yep.
And not fly again until they make some changes.
That's what they called it, the enhancement and modification period.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But, so, I mean, the thing about Virgin Galactic that always blows my mind is that this vehicle is entirely manually controlled.
Right.
There's no fly. It's not even that there's no fly-by-wire. There's no like hydraulics.
Yep.
This is a stick that connects to surfaces by wires.
Yep.
There has never been. It's been years since there's been a more like the last supersonic vehicle that had a control system this manual was the X-1.
And compared to everything else, like everything else flying is fully automatic. Blue Origin's craft, there's not a pilot on there with a joystick or a remote operator. It's all just programmed. Dragon going to the ISS, taking things into space. Inspiration 4 wasn't in there like, Jared Eisenman, like, all right, dodge the asteroids. It's all automated, right? But
I would love a flight simulator of that, because that just seems like such a unique... I think there are pilots that would love to spend tons of money to learn to fly this.
Yeah.
I think that might be their best market, actually, because I know a lot of pilots who would love to learn.
Yep.
The kind of people that fly their own private jets.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it is a manual flight mode sort of deal, and that program is going to be significantly delayed. I don't think we're going to get to any really questions there, because we do have a lot more topics to go to.
No one asked a question about it anyway.
No one asked a question about it.
That works.
Okay.
But here's one people might have questions on, and I know we've got a lot that we're moving through here. James Webby finally made it to Karoo. We've got December 18th is the targeted launch date, which conveniently puts some of the major deployments on Christmas Eve and New Year's for this thing. But man, Scott, I don't know about you, but I mean, the videos that they released after it got there very safely.
Yeah,
and
very comforting. But I won't be surprised if there's more delays. But I'm going to point out that we shouldn't be worried about this launch hitting Santa Claus,
Okay.
Because as we know, James Webb launching on time is a story we just tell children.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, James Webb is this magnificent project that's been going on for so long. Like they took almost a decade to figure out how this sun shield would deploy.
Yep. The
Like
origami mode, like.
Right. This was one of the things that's been specifically highlighted that I think Northrop Grumman overstated the technological readiness of the sun shield, and that's been one of their big things they had to solve.
Right.
And I had to go to South America because that's the launch vehicle with big enough fairing and big enough throw capability to be able to put that out there, out to L2.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest questions that I'm sure you get too, Scott, right? Is just the people who are wondering why is it launching on the Ariane? Why is it not launching on a US rocket? It's in part because that's ESA's contribution to the mission, but it's the payload fairing size of the Ariane
slightly
5.
bigger than the others, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Ariane 5 is a big rocket. It's able to throw a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So much that many Ariane launches have 2 satellites to geostationary orbit.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
They stack them in there like a clown car sometimes.
That's right.
Yeah, they really do. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be. I mean, I'm looking forward to this launch. I'm looking forward to it getting out to the L2 location. And
looking
and,
forward,
we were talking about
maybe the wrong
Lagrange
word, but yeah, I'm just like I'm hoping
Well,
it goes well. It'll be stressful.
I'm going for looking forward, and I hope the stress is implied.
I'm looking forward to seeing it at its L2 point.
Yeah, at its L2 point.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just gonna go watch some cat videos until it's there, though. So somebody on Twitter.
And I think it's worth reminding people that the Ariane has had a couple hiccups. It had the payload fairing issue that it looks like they've resolved. A couple of years ago, it wandered off into a different inclination than it was supposed to. But satellites are fine, and they got to where they needed to go. We hope none of that happens. But for the people who were worried because of the payload fairing issue occurring very close to James Webb, it really is worth reinforcing that the Ariane 5 is a very reliable launch vehicle.
Yeah, mostly.
Yeah, I was. Go ahead, Scott.
Oh no! Well, the first Ariane launch is one of the ones we famously teach.
Oh my gosh!
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like...
yes. But that was decades ago.
Decades ago. It's been really reliable since then.
Almost as long as James Webb has been in development was that
surprising,
failure, actually.
Yeah, I remember seeing. I regularly see people's theses from 2005 where they're talking about their plans to do stuff with the James Webb telescope.
Oh,
right. It's like in the future. Yeah, I mean the book, the SpaceX book, the early days of SpaceX. There's people that had come from James Webb development and were working at SpaceX
in the early days of SpaceX.
Days.
Yeah,
the early days. Yeah.
Somebody, I was saying earlier, somebody on Twitter said, "Not watching the James Webb launch is self-care." That is going to be a very hair-raising launch because of it's been in development for so long. It's so expensive. So many different parties involved to get this thing out to its destination. That's why, Scott, like you were saying, I look forward to seeing it at its Lagrange point, right?
Yeah.
Once it's there and turned on.
With something this big, I just wish they would build 2. Because building a second one isn't that much more expensive.
Yep. Why one when you get 2 for twice the price? No, that's not actually how it goes.
It's more like 14%.
14%.
That's the quote I saw from NASA.
No
kidding. If you build a second clone, 14% was what I read.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So,
man, I know, and this one is one that you'd really, you'd really like a spare if you could, but we don't have one.
It's got a 10-year lifespan as well because of consumables.
Yep.
So
right.
It's never going to be serviceable like Hubble will be.
Right.
So they should just have the next one on the production line ready to go.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
It's okay, Scott. By then, they're just going to convert Starship into one big space telescope. And
Yeah, Saul Perlmutter was talking with Elon about that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, why?
So here's a question for James Webb about it. What do we think the first observation of it will be? Now, I know you're actually asking about astronomical observation, but its first observation will actually be from itself. where it will
making sure
use its own cameras and
engineering,
instruments to calibrate
Yeah.
and focus all of those mirrors. Because so each one of those mirrors, right, even though there are 3 main panels to the mirrors, each one of those mirrors has little actuators and little motors in it. So after everything unfolds and deploys, they have to move the mirrors just a little bit, and they have to really focus the telescope across its field of view. So the first thing it will actually observe is itself.
Well, what it'll do is it'll be observing test objects. But when you say move the mirrors a little bit, right, they have to move within a fraction of a wavelength of light. We're talking fractions of micrometers, right? Nanometer precision we need to move these mirrors into locations, to their focal planes. Yeah, it's going to take forever.
Yeah. And remember, it's all folded up too, right? So, this is yeah. They've unboxed it and they've got it crammed into this little thing that fits inside the Ariane fairing, right?
Yeah.
And then it has to actually unfold into this. So the mirrors don't fold down the middle of the mirror, but the mirror, the way the sort of hexagons are set, they fold like this, and then they've got to unfold on the side so that it fits inside of there. It's like one of those little dinosaurs you put in that little gelatin capsule, and you put it in the water, and then the capsule dissolves, and it gets like bigger.
Yeah.
James Webb is like that, but when it unfolds, it needs to unfold ridiculously precisely so that the mirrors are lined up correctly.
Right. They unfold, go to their position, and then they have to tune them by pointing them at test objects, and they have some protocol for adjusting these to tiny precisions. But, when they were unboxing it, I was really afraid it would see its shadow, and then we'd have 6 more weeks of delays. But I think we've got through that.
Yeah.
Let's get a couple more questions on James Webb here, shall we?
Yes, indeed. So one person out here is asking, it's L2 Lagrange Point. How's that going to work? Why are we sending it all the way out there?
Well, the simple reason we're sending it all the way out there is it will never have Earth or the moon in its field of view. So the L2 Lagrange point is a point on the far side of the Earth, about 1.5 million kilometers away, or about 1 million miles, where Earth's gravity and the sun's gravity balance, against the rotation of, around the Earth, so that it can just sit there and sort of wobble back and forth and stay close to the Earth, but not go off into deep space.
Yeah. There we go, Scott. I got actually you had this as well, but this is actually with the James Webb on it. So that's where L2 is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did make a video explaining Lagrange points yesterday, and I think given the amount of time, we're not going to go over and explain the magic of Lagrange points, but you can watch my video on the subject if you really want to learn from astrodynamics.
I've got an entire document here with a bunch of Scott Manley.
Really cool graphics I made showing potential surfaces and stuff.
So if you want to figure out what these graphics are supposed to be, watch Scott's video. How's that?
Yeah.
Stay tuned. Yeah.
Stay tuned. Yeah.
So we put satellites that are like space telescopes out in the L2 point. If you've got something that looks at the sun, you put it at the L1 point between the Earth and the sun, and then the Earth never gets in the way of those. And it's also useful if you're doing solar observations because plasma coming from the sun will hit the L1 point before it hits the Earth. So you can actually get some advance warning of some events.
Okay.
Yeah, good to know, huh? And of course, we mentioned Lucy earlier. That's going to the L4 and L5 relative to Jupiter, right?
But in terms of exactly how it works there, Rasmus, Scott's video will explain sort of the physics behind how do you orbit an empty point in space? I think, Scott, you'll go into some more detail on that in your video, right?
But yeah, James Webb is going to sit out there with its sun. If the sun is off in this direction, the sun shield will be here, the telescope will be on the far side, and it'll just point at its various targets, and it'll just kind of hang out and blind itself.
Yep.
That's really how it works.
Technically how it works. Nice. How long is it going to take to get out there? Like after launch, do we know? Off the top of my head, I don't actually know the answer to that.
Yeah, so
Chris?
I mean, it starts the deployment sequences as it's en route to the L2 location. It's a couple of weeks is what sticks in my head for how long it'll take to get there.
We're talking months and months before this will ever be online and delivering.
Oh
pictures.
Gosh, yeah.
Because it's out past the moon, right? It's not like
well, yeah.
It's way out there, isn't it, Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and I see the humorous question after we talked about the targets and everything. Its calibration targets. What's its first astronomical observation? They don't know yet. They know the first. They know the experiments that have been approved for it, but they don't have the exact timing of that yet. And a lot of that will come as they finish out the commissioning phase.
Yeah, there's a limited area of the sky it can look at, and depending when it comes online, like whatever it looks at will have to be in that region. But they'll probably pick something that looks photogenic from the studies that have been approved. And a lot of the stuff that is designed for science isn't necessarily photogenic.
So Scott, here's I think a good question to wrap up James Webb and for us to move on, because I know a lot of people want to talk about Starship and they want your thoughts on Starship as well. So why L2 and not L4 and L5? Because Earth wouldn't get in the way of those, right?
L4 and L5 are further from the Earth. You want to have it close by. That's why.
Huh.
There you go.
Okay.
If you're that far out, also there's actually dust that is known. A lot more dust collects in L4 and L5. But yeah, it's the distance.
Is that sort of like how Jupiter shepherds the asteroids that Lucy's visiting in the L4 and L5?
Yeah.
Like stuff,
they're in a
junk
one-to-one
sort of
resonance
collects
with
there.
Jupiter.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's not so much that they collect there; that they're trapped there.
Right.
It doesn't collect new stuff because all orbital mechanics has to be reversible for dynamic reasons.
Right.
But if you could capture something, then something could also escape.
Right.
These things are trapped in there from the early solar system, and that's why they're interested, because they haven't been able to go anywhere and get messed up.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So I think we've answered quite a few questions there about James Webb. Of course, that's just one more step in the journey, getting all the way down there to the launch site in South America. Luckily, no pirates. Apparently, that wasn't even a real concern. But the telescope being down there is one more step towards the launch, and we hope that happens here later this year. Right?
Yes.
All right.
Hopefully.
Hey, I continue to see super chats and stuff like that going in, y'all. I'm not going to read through too many of them, or really any of them here, but Tim, David Dean, Musical Wolves, Crispy, Launchpad, Astronomy, appreciate you. Says, very nice explanation of rain steering. There you go. Alejandro, a future Martian, Jim Cavett, Paddle Bum. All right, Musical Wolves again. Thank y'all so much for the support. I'm not reading all the things. I'm trying to grab questions out of there and stuff like that, but let's move on. We got 17 minutes. Are we gonna Chris?
Starship
and Astra and Firefly.
Do we need to hit Astra really quickly?
I know we do.
Like
we
2
do,
minutes?
we do.
Given that we talked about the 401 as being the lowest thrust to mass ratio of any vehicle, except for Astra. I just think it was interesting that they posted the results of their investigation and a photo of the bottom of the rocket.
Yep.
Which actually shows where the umbilical joins into the rocket, and it's right next to the control box for the engine that failed. So it was a really nice little explanation.
Do I have that photo, Scott, to bring up real quick?
It was tweeted out by Chris Camp.
Okay, let me see if I've got that photo you're talking about real quick. But real quick, just summarize for us what's going on.
What happened with Astra's launch, if you remember, they went sideways. So they were like Space Y to SpaceX, right? They had basically lost an engine at 1 second. They slipped sideways about 80 meters by the looks of things, according to the Sentinel. Somebody found a satellite photo of the area afterwards, and it shows like a burn trail, like something like maybe 80 feet, but it was a long way. There we go. What a beautiful representation of science here.
All right, Scott, I showed it for you. There you go.
Yeah. So, they just basically revealed that it was related to their ground service equipment connection. Propellant leaked as they launched. It exploded, blew the side off their the raceway up the side of the rocket, damaged that engine, and then they ascended on only 4 engines, so they barely made it.
They hovered for a minute on 4 engines and then started to ascend when they started to... Did you want the image of it laying down, Scott, or the one where the team is in front of it?
Oh, they would. It's the one where the team is in front of the rockets, and you can actually see the layout. Yeah. So if you look at about the 10 o'clock position, you can see where the umbilical connects to the rocket, right? And if you zoom right in, there's a golden box next to that red spot where they connect the propellant line.
We're talking about this right here.
That red there, yeah.
Okay.
So that was where the explosion happened, and it took out that yellow box there, which controls the engine. That's basic. Like if you think electric cars, they have a box that controls the motors that goes between the power system and the motors. That's what that box probably does. I don't know, but like this is all their electronics. So when that went out, the engine shut down.
It's important because there's like 1, 2, 3.
There's one for each
5.
engine.
Yeah, there's one next to each engine, I guess.
Yeah.
So you lose one of those because you get the umbilical problem and explosion, and you lose an entire engine. And that's where they ended up with like 1.01, my museum demonstration thrust to weight in Kerbal Space Program, where it's like, is it going to take off space? And then it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But then as you run your mouth, it eventually starts to take off, burn some fuel.
And so in that same week as Astra had that problem, Firefly did their debut launch, and they had almost exactly the same thing went wrong. They lost one of their engines, but it was 15 seconds after launch. And there was like a video posted, an interview this week with Tim Dodd. Yeah. And first minute of that video, the CEO of the company literally says, this is the connection that failed. They lost an electrical connection to the valves, and the valves closed, so that engine shut down. And they figured that out because the engine cluster from the Firefly rocket, the rocket just basically went straight up. So when the engine cluster actually landed inside the bounds of Vandenberg base, and they pulled it out, and they found the connection had broken.
Yep.
And they figured out the connection had failed during flight. And so that was 2 rocket failures that we got the sort of the clues or the confirmation that what we thought went wrong was in fact what went wrong.
And that's always important. Like, yes, it was a failure. Yes, it didn't get all the way to orbit in both cases, but you learn from it. You change the system. You resolve the issue. You fix the problem, whatever it is, and you keep going. You don't throw your hands up in the air and say, well, I guess rockets don't work.
And I get to say, hey, I told you so. I guessed right.
I guessed right.
Just kidding. Let's get on to Starship.
Yeah, Astra not going anywhere. For sure, though. But here for the end of the show.
Yeah, well, and actually, just to stop to pause for just one moment. That investigation came with the announcement that the next one, their return to flight mission, is scheduled for a window that opens on October 27th.
Isn't somebody going to be helping them with the live stream?
Yeah,
I think you may see some Astra rockets on our channel somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
looking
yes,
forward
if you're coming out to the Bay Area, let me know.
Really, really quickly here, y'all. We did get a chance for our buddy Thomas to hang out with the Astra folks at their factory, and we did put out a video where there's a bunch of more detailed questions about Astra and then sort of the way they think and stuff like that. We've got that video here on this channel. I'm not playing the audio right now. If you want to hear the audio, go over to the video. I'll link it into the chat if y'all want to go and actually listen to some of the people behind Astra. I figure I'd plug that real quick. But Starship. Somebody take it away.
Starship. Well, I think the thing I'm most looking forward to now is when the chopsticks get tested for the first time.
If man catch fly with chopsticks, he can accomplish
anything. There you go.
Yes,
chopsticks. Here we go. I can bring up a picture of some chopsticks. That's the thing.
Yes, indeed. And this actually goes to one of the questions that we actually already have for Starship, which is how will they test the chopsticks?
Very carefully.
Yeah. Very carefully, I know. I mean, well, first thing to be on the tower, right? I mean, yeah, so step one.
Well, you can see that's what this image
but that's what they're going to look like.
Yeah. Let's zoom in a little bit. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I'm saying like they're going to have to move these things back and forth and actually figure out how they move so that they can adjust the control systems. Nice. I also noticed there's like hydraulic lines inside these, so there's probably mechanics that are going to mate and provide some sort of fine control when they're maneuvering it afterwards. Maybe I don't know. There's,
all sorts of stuff like tank treads on the top to move the rocket further and closer to the tower, and all this. There's got to be some fine-tuned hydraulics because if they're going to catch something with it, you're going to have to sort of clean up the catch. You can't expect it to be caught perfectly in this organization, like the orientation that you need to move it around in. But these are the chopsticks, and we saw them sort of put together the entire chopstick assembly. This is sort of looking into the chopsticks, like imagine the chopsticks were like right here coming at you. And these big red frames are temporary frames that they put together out at Boca, and they used the big crane to put the 3 different pieces of the chopsticks together. You had sort of the carriage that goes up and down the tower. It looks like a spider that sort of clings to the tower, maybe like a koala or something. And then you got the 2 big chopstick arms, which are these triangle pieces here. But this is supposed to have a booster caught in the middle of it, like that, from space. They're also going to use it
that
to
was
lift
one of
up
my
and on
Kerbal demos when they first talked about catching the booster. I had almost this exact design.
Really?
The difference was I faked it by playing the footage in reverse.
Scott.
No.
Scott. But I think the chopsticks aside, we're hoping coming in the next week we see the chopsticks actually mounted. Of course, you can keep an eye on what's happening at Starbase every single day with our Starbase live stream. We've got cameras all over the place out there, and every day it's super windy today, so it's tough to use a lot of our Zoom. But we're watching what's going on. Also,
so when they
go,
oh yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
Go ahead.
Oh no. You. I was just grabbing a question. I misinterpreted that you were done with the thought.
Oh no. I was just going to start talking about the next things we're going to expect this week. Hopefully, we might see this installed this week. We may also end up with a static fire. We still got road closures for the static fire, I believe. Let's see.
I was going to say we might see some flamey end down fun this week.
Hopefully.
Yep. We've got 2 closures in the schedule there. On Monday morning, it's an intermittent closure, which usually means that it's I feel like a traffic reporter. And down Highway 4, we're going to expect a jam around 9:30 in the morning as they move potentially a cryo shell.
Is that when they repair the road?
Oh, God.
This is when they squeeze out more asphalt like toothpaste underneath some of the stuff they move on those SBMTs.
Yeah.
But not tomorrow. On Monday, we've got an intermittent closure from 9:30 to 11:30 in the morning out there Central Daylight Time. That's intermittent usually means that they're going to be moving something, and we're thinking maybe a cryo shell is going to be going out. Intermittent just means the beach can still be open, so you can go out there to the beach. And then they close the road. You can't leave the beach, but you can still be there. As opposed to the closure later in the afternoon from 5 until midnight, a huge window there where hopefully we may see a static fire of some sort, purportedly Ship 20. We know that they did some proof testing on Ship 20 already, and they've had these sort of rolling closures. They've canceled a few. They've done some other tests during one of them. But 5 p.m. till midnight on Monday is our next chance for a static fire, which is cool. I mean,
it is indeed.
Yeah.
And it actually leads perfectly into a question that we have here.
Okay.
So Musical Wolves was wanting to know, did Starship get its allergy shot so that it won't sneeze off any more heat shield tiles?
Allergy shot. I think they've resolved that. Of course, referring there to there was a cascade of heat shield tiles that came off the side of the thing.
Thanks to RCS firing. It wasn't so much as it has to sneeze, unfortunately.
I don't understand. It was
they need sneeze guards.
They need like a deflector. Like, how do you put...
Yeah, sneeze deflectors.
Did they just not do the math on that? Did they install a tile somewhere the tile wasn't supposed to be? Is there some atmospheric Bernoulli effect that sucked some tiles off or something? Like,
what I saw was it was the white underlay that was getting pushed up.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, it could entirely be like some sort of Venturi effect where the air is getting sucked in by the flow. And frankly, this stuff is really hard to model. Fluid dynamics will like bite you in the ass all the time because it's way more complicated than you originally thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know how well this heat shield is going to work. This is the big thing we're waiting on. Did you see the document from NASA about studying the heat shield performance and re-entry with a March 2022 date?
Yes. What did that say, Scott? It was like we're planning to be able to get an opportunity to monitor the performance, something, and it gave the date of March.
March 2022. But that's probably the hardware. It'll be on a WB-57.
Yeah, which is interesting.
It's fascinating that Starship is part of the instrumentation monitoring it dates from the 50s. Yeah. It's closer to the Wright brothers' first flight.
That's
Wow.
some people
Well, I
in
mean,
chat.
kind of appropriate for a rocket that basically looks like what they thought rockets would look like in the 50s.
Yeah,
You
right.
know?
I mean, yeah.
I never saw half the 50s rockets with heat shield tiles on them though. They were always
No, but
shiny.
they nailed the shiny part of it pretty
It's
well
like
in the landings.
we
yeah.
took real technology from the shuttle and 50s sci-fi and we merged them together into an actual rocket. I should probably be looking for a picture of that, but whatever. Some people in chat saying that it was a header tank vent that blew off some of those tiles. So yeah, not a thruster firing, but a header tank vent. And did it hit the tiles directly? Was there some of that white underlayment that we see? And did that get caught and that sort of popped the tiles off?
That's what I saw.
Yeah.
Like that moved like
first.
You could see that it bent up at the edge and then the tiles come off.
Yeah.
So it's like peeling up,
Yep.
like grabbing the
And we've seen tweets from Elon. Elon did say that Starship is a difficult problem. Like recent tweets from Elon saying Starship's a difficult problem.
Yeah, heat shield is going to be everything, and they have to be able to fix this heat shield quickly. It has to not fail, but also like they need, if there's a cracked tile, they need an easy way to pop it off and replace it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we sort of started the Starship discussion with, here's the chopsticks. Hopefully we get a static fire, sort of what's coming up this week. Do we have questions about Starship?
I mean, what do you guys think about Booster 5 and SN21? Those are going far ahead. Are we going to find out that SN20 and B4 never fly?
That is a good question.
You would not surprise me if that ends up being the case. I mean, I think for Elon's personal numerical likenesses, he'd really love
420.
He'd really love 420 to fly. But with just how far, with the pace at which they're building 5 and 21, I've just got to wonder.
He's going to relabel
especially since like we don't appear to be close to the orbital flight, and of course we've still got the open comment period from with the FAA for the environmental assessment, which closes on November 1st. So conservatively, what I keep saying, about 30 days if there's nothing major that comes out of it. So probably early December we'll get the finalized version of that, maybe. But there's still
we don't know what's going to be in that.
Right, exactly. Like, we're not
this
close.
is a federal agency. It's not Texas, which is a little more permissive on many things.
Leniency when it comes to.
Yes.
Although I'm going to say one of the groups complaining about it are like the Civil War monument people. They're the ones that are complaining about the tower being there.
What are they complaining about? Have you seen their specific complaints?
I'm not sure. Basically, it was cited that the tower stature is more of a problem for the Civil War battlefield because it changes the look. But I don't know where that reference came from. But
okay,
interesting.
But it's a historic location. And...
Let me talk about downtown Boston real quick. It doesn't look anything like it did during the 1700s. Yes. I'm just gonna say, I'll throw that out there. Progress.
Yeah, there's a reason for that, and it's not because somebody wants to build a rocket in downtown Boston.
Exactly.
Right. So we kind of started talking about this and got off on the conversation with Starship here. But the question was actually, how will they test the chopsticks? And I don't think we actually ever answered that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I guess my thought is of how they'll do this is like they'll first be a sequence of functional checks just to make sure they move and operate the way they want. But then I'm also thinking that maybe, I mean, I don't know, Scott, help me out here, but I would just think that one day we might just see them going through the motions, but it's a virtual booster that it's trying to catch.
I hope we get like a Starship-sized thwomp, right? You counterweight.
Yep.
Right.
So that it, catches it, right?
You see it on the other side. I'm curious, do you risk Booster 4 the first time you test this? Do you put something else out there? Is somebody going to put little nubbins on Booster 3?
It's entirely possible, given that Booster 5 is so far advanced, that they might test this with Booster 4.
Just say Booster 4, all right. And then 5 becomes Booster 4 Block 2 or something, so that it's still, ship 20 and Booster 4.
Internal numbering systems.
Yeah. I don't think they know their internal numbering systems sometimes.
Oh, yeah. I heard it changed a lot with Falcon,
Yeah. But I guess that sort of opens it up to a different thing because, and another question that we have here, Scott, because a lot of what we keep saying is like, well, this was the plan when they were talking about an orbital flight on July 1st, right? And we haven't really gotten an update on that yet. But but Jacob is saying, like, how come only 5 orbital flights a year for this in the testing campaign? Doesn't that not really meet the requirements of tackling the problems in the development of this vehicle? Isn't the flight rate that they put in that environmental
how many test flights
low?
does Saturn V get? Right, like they weren't doing a huge number of test flights, and they had a lot less instrumentation and electronics you could put on these things. I don't think it's ridiculous. What it is incompatible with is demonstrating the ability to refuel Starship in orbit with high cadence.
Right.
For that, they're either going to have to modify the environmental assessment or Phobos and Deimos.
Yep. That's going to be interesting to see how they actually fit that cadence in there. I mean, they need test flights. And we stopped our hops. Like, we always thought, all right, they're going to get Starship going, and then SN10, SN11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We're going to do all these little suborbital hops.
Supersonic flight.
Yeah, the supersonic test that Elon talked about, like all these things. Talking about. Where'd that go? Right? Is that going to happen?
They've realized that they have to play nice with environmental reviews right now.
Yeah. So once they get in there, like, something, you get 5 good orbital test flights under your belt, then you can come back with more firepower and say, here's the actual impact. We need to do this more often. So here's the next thing. Now we need to start doing a flight a month or whatever, 12 flights a year.
Yeah. Either that or they need to move it offshore.
Yeah.
And, let's remember that if they are going to hit the Artemis launches, they need to actually launch like maybe as many 10 boosters in a reasonably short period of time.
Yep.
Right, because it's 16 tanker flights, isn't it?
It depends on what their ultimate mass ratio is.
Right.
Yeah. It could be 16. It could be 6.
Yep.
Right? Depending upon where the performance ends up.
Yep. What can Starship actually end up doing? There's all sorts of numbers that people have guessed and estimated, and Elon's targets and all this stuff. But hey, what's it actually going to be? Because just because Elon wants it to be that doesn't mean that's what the fueling's going to be the first time they do it.
Right.
And
always working towards that.
So minor changes in your first stage mass can have a significant effect on the tanker mass, and ultimately
that's why you look at things like the different millimeter of the stainless steel, and they're testing these 3mm tanks, and changes like that can make huge wide-ranging impacts throughout the rest of the program. Every
kilo of hardware on the second stage is a kilo of fuel that you can't carry into orbit.
Yep. So continuing to watch what's going on there. Scott, how are you on time? Because it's 4:33 right now.
Oh, at some point I got to stop. I was supposed to be. I was invited onto the BBC, but unfortunately we just clashed with this show. So I was like, what? I'm gonna stick with NSF because you guys asked first.
Went with the cooler folks, I guess.
You guys are
BBC.
Cool, yeah.
Like
BBC wouldn't have had DS9 in the background, which is the best track.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Yes.
Let's see.
What questions do you see, Das? Yeah.
No, that's what I was going to say. Let's go and start grabbing some more questions. Again, I see more super chats coming in, folks. Thank y'all so much for the support. Not spending too much time. Gone to text. John Ferris, Dougal, across the board. Thank y'all for the support. I know I'm like speeding running those super chats today, but let's grab a couple Starship questions here.
Yes. Well, we've seen a lot of activity of them taking the Raptor boost and the Raptor center engines out and around and all this shuffling. Jonathan asking if we have any info on why they keep bringing them in and taking them away. It's a test campaign.
Yep.
I'm not actually surprised to see that. Exactly why they're taking them away. Maybe that's because they want to take them back for some refurbishment. Maybe that's because they're going for additional testing. Maybe that's because better versions with higher numbers have arrived, so they're going to swap some things out and around.
Yep.
Here, it's a test campaign. This type of stuff is not uncommon. It's just uncommon for us to have the unprecedented level of access to see it all happening.
And you got to remember, we see a lot of Raptors around Starbase because Starship and the booster are going to need a lot of Raptors, right? So you see 2 Raptors on a truck going back to McGregor or something like that. That's not the end of the world because they're flush with Raptors out there. It's hard to shake a stick without hitting a Raptor at Starbase. So we see a lot of them.
McGregor's getting set up to manufacture them now. They've started foundations for their factory there.
And the test site that's just up the road at Highway 4 there. So they've got that old gun range that SpaceX is working on putting a test site into. So
Exactly.
we see a lot of them, but it's not necessarily something to worry about just because we see them. A, Highway 4 goes right past where they load them, so it's easy for us to see them. And B, they're still developing them, working on the engines, and they don't do it there at the backside of Starbase. They actually ship them up the road to McGregor. 7 hours up the road, but, up the road. All right. Let's grab some more questions real quick.
Yeah. So Jacob was asking how they put the booster back into place with the chopsticks. So this is something that we saw when they were lifting and mounting them. That there's a little track on the catch mounts, so that they can actually, like, the booster would come down, land wherever it lands on the arm, and then a little track can move it up and down the arm so they can get it,
and they can move it at different
that
rates
way.
to rotate it.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty cool how they're going to do it and how they're going to position it. But
Yep.
yeah, it's little tracks on the arms. Yep.
And the other important thing, I think, is the design of the arm with the single sort of central pivot point, right? So when they put luckily the chopsticks are on screen right now. When they put this together, there's a massive pin that goes into like a single pivot point that's right in the middle of that. So when you pivot the chopsticks, they don't go like this, right? They go more like this because they have a solid connection in the middle. That's why they come back. It all sort of triangles back, like triangles. How do they work? They all triangle back to that center pivot point in the frame so that they can pivot that entire assembly, and you don't have the booster sort of, the arms are moving and this is moving. It's like one big structure that catches it, and then it pivots off to the side. It can pick it up off the ground and clamp the booster, then pick it up, then pivot over this way. And like you said, the little tank treads, I think Elon called them, where they can actually roll the boost. This sounds crazy to me, by the way, but they can move the booster up and down the chopsticks using tank treads. Like, what? Have you seen the teeny tiny little nubs that they catch that on? Like, this is going to be really interesting to see happen.
Yes, it will. Just yes, it will. I think
that's fine for the booster, but I mean, they're talking about capturing Starship on this is something like this as well. I don't know. What are they going to lose the heat shield tiles? That's not going to be compatible.
Do you have to dodge the aft flaps? Like, you're trying to catch it under the armpits. Like, it's almost like throwing a baby up in the air. Anybody throwing it? Don't throw it. NASASpaceflight not responsible for you throwing a baby in the air.
Be very careful when you're throwing babies.
Yes.
But I love how yours, Das, was don't do it, and Scott was, well, be careful.
Be careful
when you do it.
I've thrown babies.
It's our show. It's not Scott's show.
No, my daughter worked out.
I have to do the disclaimer for NASASpaceflight. He can say whatever. But how does that work? I don't know.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, we're kind of getting a little about questions about that, about like how are they going to test that, and like, do you think they do a suborbital test and try to come down on one of these? Which, I guess by definition, if you launch the Super Heavy with a Starship on top of it, the Super Heavy is suborbital and just can come right back. Although I think they're talking about like Starships. Could you use Starships to just launch them suborbitally and test the catch? Some people are even asking, like, could you hoist the booster up on a crane and drop it an inch onto the arms?
Or booster hopper.
Do that?
Right, just have the booster take off and go sideways, just like a hopper.
Yeah. I think I don't know if SpaceX is going to do this. This is me making stuff up, but if it was me, I would design a drop test article that you could literally hoist up on the crane and, have the arms in position, but drop
have a counterweight.
Yeah, something.
I mean, they've got two boosters. You've got your counterweight there. Booster 4, booster 5, counterweight cable. Bang.
Back and forth. No, but you could design a drop test article in such a way that you raise it up on the crane, you drop it, even if it's just a foot, because the booster's not supposed to be falling like 100 feet and then hit the arm, right? It's supposed to be almost zero vertical velocity when it gets caught. But can the arm take that impact? Could you drop it from any height, or even just lower it at some rate that would simulate what vertical velocity you thought it was going to be? But if it fails, you could design the drop test article such that it falls away from the tower like a tree, so you don't have the booster come over and hit the tower if your catch doesn't work correctly. I would probably try to design something and test it out in such a way so that if something goes wrong, it doesn't fall on the orbital tank farm. It's almost like a tree, like a wedge in a tree on the bottom, and it hits, and then it's going to fall over into the flats.
Yeah, just make your flame diverter work that way.
There you go.
Bang!
I would be surprised. Now, with knowing SpaceX, we probably won't ever see that, but I would be really... I don't know.
I fully expect this tower to be seriously damaged at some point. I'm under no illusions that this tower is going to handle all the testing.
Yep.
There's so many things that can go wrong.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then again, I'm always happy to be proven wrong on these things. I tend to have a worst case scenario kind of attitude.
Well, one way or the other, it's going to be a great show to watch them test this thing.
Spectacular.
We'll have cameras out there, Scott, and if they have a booster hurtling towards the tower, we'll see what happens. Like, one way to find out.
Hopefully you'll be able to recover the camera and footage afterwards.
That's why I send it in real time, so if you just obliterate the camera, we still got the footage until it went offline. No recovering SD cards. We need like an armored SD card container that we put it in, like just a 2-inch steel.
Do they sell those armored SD containers? Wouldn't that be great?
The whole camera, just plate
oh my god,
steel.
there's a business you could have where it's like an armored server with Wi-Fi, and you just connect your cameras to it via Wi-Fi. It will survive anything. You
put the server down, then you just pour concrete around. You just encase it in concrete, like 4 feet of concrete. Access to the server. Hope you plugged in everything correctly.
It's just storage. Yeah. Oh, can you push the reset button on it? Yeah, let me get the drill.
Yeah, let me get the jackhammer out.
So Everyday Space Nerd here is asking about, going back to our conversation about the orbital refueling elements of this, and is asking Scott, what do you think about the idea? Let me try that again with proper English. What do you think of the idea of orbital Starship fuel depots as being a potential reasonable possibility for Artemis missions instead of doing 6 of them? Just put a big tank up there and refill that.
Well, I mean, they're still going to have to refill them, so it's going to be the same hardware either way.
Yeah.
And since it has to launch on top of a Starship, it's going to be aerodynamic. And since they've got a baseline vehicle they've developed, they might as well be a Starship. But it could be an orbital depot that doesn't have a heat shield. It just is a tank. It might have a whole bunch of other stuff cut out to maximize the amount of volume and minimize the amount of dead weight.
Yep.
So, I think you're going to see that for Starship stuff, they're going to minimize the amount of changes they make because it reduces development time.
Yeah, like having a common sort of platform that you do with this stuff. And all right, maybe you don't have to put the heat shields on because we see that for the Artemis land or the lunar Starship designs.
Yeah, lunar
right?
Starship. I don't know how close that is to the final version, but clearly they've started from a point that is the minimum amount of adaptation needed.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I mean, clear out the interior, put a couch and put an elevator on the side and paint it white.
Right.
Like, you know.
And 2 airlocks.
Go to the moon.
And 2 airlocks, yeah.
That was a big advantage, was the 2 airlocks. Yeah.
We're already over. I mean, we're almost 15 minutes over at this point. We got to get Scott on more of our just regular hangout shows. You down, Scott?
I think I have a good final question, though. So go ahead, Das. But I think I've got a good final.
Oh no,
question
I was just gonna say, like, we need to get Scott to do some tank watching with us sometimes.
Oh man,
we do.
It's always during my work day.
I know.
But, yeah.
It's tough. What's the question, Chris? Go ahead.
How important do you think it is to send artists to space? Nikki is saying Ray Bradbury wrote a story, Forever and the Earth, saying that we should be sending artists to space in order to finally get it. What do you think of that?
I personally think that art in space is really, really important, but I think a lot of astronauts are also artists. All right, if you've looked at Alan Bean or Alexei Leonov, he was a fairly good artist in himself. But somebody that makes their living as an artist definitely has skills and insights that regular astronauts may not be able to separate. I personally think art is really important in all of this. I'm just a fan of it in general. You can't have a species or a civilization that entirely exists on science, because wherever you are in the universe, the science is the same. But humanities art will always be humanities.
Yeah, the special things that make us who we are, I guess, right? The human thing, like the wavelength of hydrogen is whatever, but humans are humans.
Yep. But then again, some of the art we come up with, I'm like, really? Oh, okay.
It's just we paint it with a very broad brush. Our breadth of our art there. Let's put it that way.
If you have to ask what art is, then you're gatekeeping or whatever, right?
There you go. And I'm seeing if I missed anything else. I'm going to run through the queue real quick. Hey, Korschlager, thank you so much for becoming a Capcom. I hope I didn't just curse in German or something. Let's see. I'm just making sure I didn't miss any super chat questions or anything like that. We answered stuff about the chopsticks. There's a real quick question about anticipated upcoming missions. Scott, you got your eye on anything specific coming up?
DART is launching in November. That's the one that's going to smash into an asteroid, I've said. That's a big one for me. And of course, we get Crew 3 really soon.
Yep. Chris, anything you're interested in coming up here?
It's James Webb.
James Webb.
For me, it's James Webb.
Going to be holding my breath when James Webb launches. I'll tell you that much.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I've done a couple shows with James Webb engineers, so James Webb is a huge one for me as well. Like just sort of seeing all the work that's gone into it. Whatever you think about, it's over budget, 80 years behind, whatever. It's still a cool piece of kit. It is a cool thing that we've designed that we're going to try to get up there amongst the stars. And it's almost going to feel. I don't want to say this wrong, but it's almost going to feel like a crew launch because crew launches are different, right? You're tossing some Starlinks up there and you're like, oh, okay, Starlinks. That's great, whatever. But then Inspiration 4 launches and you're like, there are people on board that rocket and it feels different.
And the doggy.
There you go. Yeah, one of the plushes.
Yes.
Nice. It feels different and as much as it costs and whatever it is, it's still not a human life. But there's so much human life that's gone into making James Webb's telescope happen. When it launches, the needle's going to be sort of ticking up on the wow. That's a very important thing to get right the first time, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But we should still have 5 of them sitting in a factory ready to go, frankly.
Just common bus James Webb telescopes and just ready to go.
They're oversubscribed,
yeah.
Right? There's too many people wanting to do things with it. We should have more of them.
Yep.
And they'll be a lot cheaper.
Yep. It really is. I mean, all of our handcrafted, artisanally designed spacecraft, it's like this one went to Mars and then we don't have a lot of deep space probes that are, say, maybe big stuff like this that's mass-produced. Starlink in low Earth orbit is sort of a mass-produced.
It's amazing how cheap Starlink is because they are mass-produced.
Yep.
Right.
And we've got some CubeSats and like smaller things where the form factor is sort of the commonality, so you can launch it easier. But we don't have like go down and get you a Class C hull, and then we're going to put a science instrument like this science package to go to Jupiter or whatever. Like we don't have that yet.
You have things like the 1300 bus that Maxar sells for satellites. There's a bunch of commonality, but it's still put together carefully by hand. There's no production line. It's cluster satellite constellations are the exception.
Yep. Is that like more for the communication satellites, weather like we have satellites here around
the 1300
Earth?
bus? That was originally for geostationary satellites.
Gotcha.
But, some other spacecraft use it, like the Psyche mission is being built around a 1300. Yeah. It's like the most launched satellite chassis, I think.
Yeah. It's always seemed to me like maybe I just don't hear about it as much, but when we get down to the point where it's like, oh yeah, we're sending a mission to Jupiter, but we're just going to get one of this basic design and then put our instruments on it, as opposed to designing the entire thing from scratch, like bespoke construction or whatever, So anyways.
Designing something that can go out to Jupiter means you got to consider the thermals, and then you're into a whole custom study.
Yep.
But wouldn't it be great if you buy the parts, put them together, and then click a button and it tells you, oh wait, you need more insulation.
Yep.
You need bigger solar panels, whatever.
Like Mech Warrior, I'm going to put on the Class 4 PPC, like, all right, fine, and then I need to upgrade the heat
drag and
sinks,
drop.
like, whatever, drag and drop. Anyways,
Rocket Lab's Photon is supposed to solve some of those problems as well. That you can just bolt your instruments onto their bus.
Yep, exactly. It's the same thing we do in Kerbal, because it's like, I've designed the satellite and now I need to complete this contract, so let's just slap a gravioli detector on it.
Right.
Okay.
But
on my keyboard, that's Option Control C.
Yes.
At some
Thermals.
point, if we keep talking, I'm going to have to go downstairs and like grab a space beer or something like that, because we're going to leave NASASpaceflight Live that we do every week and go into random hangout with Scott Manley here.
Well, I do have to get lunch. I'm starving, and we're expecting rain tomorrow, and I got to winterize a lot of things.
Oh my gosh, in California, my goodness!
Yes, I know. How beautiful! We'll have rain. I'll have to actually worry about my garage flooding. I do have things to do.
In any event, let's let Scott Manley go get some lunch here, folks. We always have so much fun with these shows, especially Scott. This was a fantastic show.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've just got a chance to just sit down and just sort of shoot the bull with you. And this was a good time here, just talking about what's been going on with space. So, folks, massive thanks to Scott Manley here. Scott, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, of
Fly
course.
safe.
You know Scott, he's on Twitter, DJ S&M. He's on YouTube, of course, as well. If you found our channel, you probably already know about Scott's channel. But mods, put a link over there to Scott's YouTube channel. A lot of really cool, in-depth discussions of different physics, different trajectories, how things work. Scott's always done a fantastic job of putting that sort of stuff out there so we can understand it, right? That's why I know how to play Kerbal. But again, Scott, thank you so much. Chat's saying thanks right now, Scott. So massive thanks for spending time with us today. Also, Chris Gebhardt, thank you as well. Good times.
My absolute pleasure. And Scott, thank you for joining us. I'll echo what Dosh just said. When I don't know how to do something in KSP and I Google it, it's usually one of your videos that pops up.
Exactly. And hey, massive thanks to Chris today, because Chris was out for Lucy super early in the morning, and then came back in to dial into the show. Michael and I sort of, all right, Michael, you take Lucy at night, and then I'll do NSF Live the next day. We sort of divvy that up. Chris showed up for both of them. So, Chris, thank you so much for being here
Technically,
today.
I did, but I didn't do it live. But...
There you go.
Well, technically, you were with us for both of them. So
yes, yeah.
And lastly, I'm John Galloway for NASASpaceflight. Y'all might know me as DOS over on my Twitch channel if people are watching over on Twitch today. But that is going to bring us to the end of NSF Live, our live show we do every week. Always goes over, especially when I'm in charge and the guests say that they don't mind sticking around for a couple extra minutes. But for now, be on the lookout for more streams coming up this week. If there is a static fire, I bet you dollars to donuts, I guarantee you we're going to be covering it for NASASpaceflight. In the meantime, Starbase Live is 24/7. Over there, you can watch what's going on at Starbase. Super windy out there today, so I don't have a lot of the cameras zoomed in much, but hopefully that wind calms down a little bit. We can get some details what's going on out there. And whatever else is going on, probably see what moves on Monday at Stardust, Starbase. Anyways, we are not going anywhere. If you haven't yet followed the channel, subscribe to the channel here on YouTube, make sure you do it. You know how to get back if this is the sort of content you like. But for now, we're going to go ahead and shut down the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for all the support and super chats and new subs and stuff like that. Scott, one more time, thank you so much, and we will see you nerds later. Thanks for joining us, y'all.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
Our pressure looks good. Traveling up. Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight Delta, SC off. Bring in, SC off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.